Just kind of came out and I tried to hold her and she's breathing. She doesn't have a heartbeat.
So now, what do you do when you realize that she's not going to make it?
I have to bury her. I couldn't tell anybody.
Kim and Scott Richardson had a happy marriage, and their love and commitment brought their firstborn Skylar into the world on March 9, 1999. Later, they welcomed Jackson. Both children grew up in a peaceful environment. Weekends were family bonding times at home. Neighbors often saw them in their backyard, where Kim and Scott would grill food and work in the garden. Skylar and Jackson enjoyed playing with the family dogs, their laughter filling the air. Family celebrations, including birthdays, holidays, and graduations, took place around bonfires in the yard, which had witnessed countless joyful moments. It was a refuge of peace. No one could have imagined that in this backyard, amidst the Richardson family's happiness, an unutterable secret was buried. As Skylar grew older, weight and diet, issues that sometimes hide behind a seemingly perfect facade, played a central role in her life. These concerns became her obsession, leading to unexpected and painful situations. For Kim, the impact of these issues was undeniable. Her worry began in Skylar's early adolescence when her daughter already showed signs of eating disorders. At 12 years old, Skylar was obsessed with calories, refusing to buy gum because it added 5 calories to her diet. She attended high school in Ohio, excelling as a cheerleader. Being a cheerleader required her to be small and agile, traits she had, making her a perfect flyer. This role involved performing aerial stunts and holding complex poses for a few seconds before returning to the ground. However, the pressure to stay thin marked the beginning of Skylar's struggle with her weight. Her obsession with not gaining even a gram led to dangerous behaviors like induced vomiting, but when the cheerleading season ended, Skylar would binge eat. She then subjected herself to severe fasting periods. Discussing her weight was a taboo topic in the family, and Skylar's extremely reserved nature made addressing the issue difficult. The Richardsons sought professional help, including doctors, therapists, and nutritionists, but no intervention seemed to ease her suffering. Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a disorder characterized by an obsession with perceived physical flaws. Amid her dissatisfaction with herself, she became increasingly reserved and kept numerous secrets, deeply worrying her parents. However, from the outside, everything seemed perfect at home. Skylar was seen as a beautiful and popular young woman during her high school years, excelling as a cheerleader and radiating vitality and joy in her school community. Her younger brother Jackson was on the football team at the same school, which contributed to the Richardson family's reputation as exemplary. In late July 2016, just before her senior year of high school, Skylar started a relationship with a friend's cousin, but it ended quickly. However, in January 2017, she found a new love, Brandon, a junior at her school. Skylar seemed happy and even appeared to be gaining weight, which gave her family hope. This change suggested that Skylar had her eating disorder under control. Her choice of a form-fitting dress for prom and her healthy appearance increased her parents' confidence in her well-being. In March, Skylar even went on a family vacation, wearing a two-piece bikini showing some curves. Skylar and Brandon's relationship seemed to be going well, and her mother's concerns led her to address a sensitive topic: pregnancy. Kim wanted Skylar to take measures to protect herself, so she took her to the gynecologist in April. At this point, Skylar was 18 years old, so she went into the exam room alone. What should have been a routine visit for a contraceptive prescription turned traumatic for Skylar. Her tears as she left the office indicated something troubling, but Kim assumed it was due to it being her first visit, which can be emotional and somewhat invasive for a reserved girl like her daughter. Little did her mother know that the cause of her tears was a shocking revelation. The doctor informed Skylar that she was pregnant, and not just newly pregnant. She was already 8 months along. Skylar desperately asked the doctor to keep this secret, as her parents couldn't know. 9 days after the gynecologist visit on May 5, 2017, Skylar attended prom with Brandon. Despite being in her advanced pregnancy, her form-fitting dress fit her surprisingly well. It's worth noting that she had tried on the same dress in February, and it fit the same 3 months later. Apparently, she hadn't gained any weight in those 90 days, which is highly unusual for someone so far along in pregnancy. Perhaps that's why no one noticed the secret that was about to change her life forever. Less than 48 hours after attending prom, nature took its course, and it was time for the baby to be born. In the early hours of May 7th, Skylar gave birth to a small baby girl in the bathroom of the Richardson home. The newborn, apparently lifeless, became a dark secret that Skylar feared her parents would discover. In a panic, she decided to bury the baby in the backyard of their home. No one knew about this incident. In the weeks that followed, Skylar continued her life, outwardly acting as if nothing had happened. She didn't tell anyone about the tragic event that haunted her. In July 2017, she visited her gynecologist again and asked for a contraceptive prescription. As expected, the doctor asked what had happened with her pregnancy. She replied that her baby had been stillborn and that she had buried the body in the backyard of her family's home. Unbeknownst to her, revealing this secret set justice in motion, the police received a concerning call from a doctor who reported that after a gynecology and obstetrics consultation, a patient had given birth at home and buried the baby in the backyard. This call triggered a series of events that shook the Richardson family to its core. Kim and Scott were taken aback when the police arrived at their door on July 14, 2017. It was a sunny summer day, and Skylar was at her grandmother's pool, enjoying happy moments with her boyfriend and cousins. She had no idea they were coming for her. The family was entirely unaware of the gravity of the situation when the police contacted them. According to Scott's later statements, the police assured them that they only wanted to talk to Skylar about something she might have witnessed and insisted she was not in any trouble. Trusting those words, Scott took his daughter to the police station without proper legal representation, an action he would later consider one of the biggest mistakes of his life. On that same July 14th, when Scott accompanied his daughter to the police station, he had no idea that she had been hiding such a dark secret. At the station, the officers asked him to wait outside since Skylar was an adult. Inside an interrogation room, a police officer read Skylar her rights and began pressuring her to reveal what had happened with her baby.
So just kind of help me, walk through this. So what did you do? I guess, is your bedroom upstairs or bathroom upstairs? Okay, so you had to walk downstairs?
I had to clean myself up a little.
Are you carrying her?
Yes.
Did you go into the garage, or do you have an outdoor shed where you have a
I have
shovel?
my garage.
The family was about to face a crisis that would impact their lives in unimaginable ways. In the small interrogation room, Skylar finally shared the truth with the investigators.
Please, just get out of this what's going to happen?
I don't know, okay? I'm in here observing.
Jail?
No. You're not going to jail today. No.
No, and I'm not going to.
Just relax, okay? Listen, just relax, okay?
I don't want to go to jail.
I know you don't. Just relax,
I don't have to go to jail, though, right?
Listen, I understand that you're sorry, and I understand that you're upset, and I understand that you didn't want this to happen, okay? Just take some deep breaths, okay? Everything's gonna be okay.
I don't have to go to jail.
You're not going to jail.
In the early hours of May 7th, Skylar faced the unimaginable alone in her bathroom. She gave birth to a baby who showed no signs of life. She held the newborn for hours, hoping for a miracle that never came. Resigned to the heartbreaking reality and ensuring not to wake her family, she quietly buried her daughter in a makeshift grave in their backyard using a small garden trowel. During a tense interrogation that followed, the investigator eventually disclosed to Skylar's parents, Scott and Kim, the grave reason for their daughter's questioning. Shocked by the news and unable to comprehend how they had missed the signs of her pregnancy, they listened as Skylar shared the baby's name, Annabelle, and revealed the brief relationship with the father, a cousin of a friend from the previous summer. This revelation devastated her mother, Kim, who later expressed her anguish over the pain Skylar had endured alone. As the family absorbed this new reality, investigators were already moving towards their home to dig deeper into the case, unbeknownst to them. The small town quickly buzzed with the news as police activity spiked in an area unaccustomed to such attention, drawing national media to the story of the troubled young cheerleader. That same day, authorities exhumed the remains of baby Annabelle for forensic examination. After enduring over 5 hours of grueling questions at the station, Skylar and her parents were allowed to go home. However, the respite was short-lived. 6 days later, the investigators returned with unsettling news from the autopsy. There were signs of charring on Annabelle's bones, suggesting she had been burned, which led them to suspect homicidal violence. On July 20th, 2017, during a second intense interview without her legal or parental support, Skylar was directly accused by police of killing and burning her baby. Throughout the interview, she steadfastly refuted the allegations, denying any use of heat or fire 17 times, and insisting 29 times that Annabelle was stillborn, maintaining her innocence against the grave charges laid before her.
Did you hear any crying after? Or did you hear any little cry? Okay.
Under the intense pressure of the interrogation, Skylar eventually changed her story, admitting that she might have partially burned the baby's body. When asked if the baby had made any noises at birth, she hesitantly mentioned that there might have been a sound. After an hour of intense questioning, the detectives decided they had enough to arrest her and charged her with reckless homicide, suspecting the baby had suffocated. Skylar was released on bail, but this was just the beginning of her legal battles. The prosecutor publicly laid out the charges: aggravated murder, which could lead to a life sentence, involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, and abuse of a corpse. He argued that Skylar's actions were driven by her family's desire to maintain a perfect facade. Despite these heavy accusations, Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, remained determined to clear her name with the help of their lawyers. Scott voiced his frustration over how the police had misled them from the beginning, telling them Skylar wasn't in trouble, only to detain her and search their home for evidence once they brought her to the station. Kim described the ordeal as a nightmare, noting how Skylar's arrest reignited her struggles with eating disorders and psychological stress. The legal drama attracted intense media scrutiny and public speculation, resulting in a gag order, although by then the Richardsons were already facing widespread criticism and hostility. Online and outside their home, the family endured harsh criticism, protests, and threats, feeling under constant surveillance and harassed by people who distorted their images online. Amid this turmoil, they hired experienced defense attorneys who contended that Skylar's confession was coerced. The case took a twist when the pathologist who initially reported charring on the baby's remains withdrew her statement, confirming there was no evidence of burning. Despite this new evidence, the prosecutor stood firm on the charges, insisting on the validity of Skylar's initial admissions during the interrogation. However, the defense succeeded in getting Skylar placed under house arrest. At home, surrounded by books and her dogs, she tried to find some peace under a pine tree where her parents had placed an angel ornament at the burial site of her baby, whom she called Angel. In a reflective interview, Scott explained that from Skylar's perspective, she was handling the sudden and tragic event the best she could, believing the baby was still born. He detailed how she tenderly placed the baby in the ground and marked the spot with a flower. As time passed, her dreams of attending the University of Cincinnati had to be put on hold. The uncertainty of her future weighed heavily on her and her family. However, the prosecution viewed this as her undergoing the justice process that was deemed necessary, aiming to seek justice for the baby. The case itself was fraught with tension and division. Kim, Skylar's mother, voiced her frustrations with the legal process, feeling that the defense's points were completely disregarded by the prosecution, which she found to be exceedingly cold and dismissive. The prosecution maintained that an innocent life had been unjustly taken, and it was their duty to seek reparation. In July 2019, the case took an unexpected turn when the prosecutor offered Skylar a deal: dropped the aggravated murder charge if she pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, thus avoiding a trial but still facing up to 15 years in prison. This proposal brought immense anguish to the Richardson family, but ultimately, the decision rested with Skylar. On one decisive Sunday morning, Skylar resolved not to plead guilty to crimes she maintained she did not commit. She chose to let a jury decide her fate at trial. 2 years after the distressing events, the trial began on September 3, 2019. The prosecution started with a startling revelation, quoting a text message from Skylar to her mother that exposed her troubled emotional state shortly after she secretly gave birth and buried the baby in the backyard. The prosecution also displayed a selfie Skylar had taken at the gym that same day, using these pieces to argue that Skylar had no intention of keeping the baby. Although proving the baby was born alive was a challenge, the prosecution contended that Skylar's own admissions during interrogation supported their case. Witnesses for the prosecution testified that Skylar had seen the baby's arms move and heard her make sounds, suggesting life. They also claimed Skylar might have inadvertently harmed the baby. Moreover, they accused her of trying to burn the baby's remains. Trey Johnson, presented as the baby's father, testified about their brief relationship and the unprotected sexual encounters they had. When it was time for the defense, Skylar's lawyers argued that she had been subjected to overly aggressive questioning, leading to a coerced confession. They disputed the assumption that she had attempted to burn her baby, noting that the forensic expert who initially supported this claim had later withdrawn it. They presented evidence of Skylar's significant weight fluctuations due to her long-standing battle with anorexia, which they claimed was exacerbated by her mother's pressure to remain thin. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy testified that the baby died from homicidal violence of undetermined origin. Yet, under cross-examination, she admitted there was no physical evidence to support a live birth, or that Skylar had directly caused harm to her child. Witnesses for the prosecution also acknowledged the lack of physical evidence of a live birth, with no trauma or burns found on the baby's remains. The defense stressed that the only evidence suggesting a live birth came from Skylar's statements, which they argued were the result of coercion by the police. An obstetrician also testified that he didn't believe the baby was alive at birth. He noted that the umbilical cord wasn't cut, which might mean it came off before or during delivery. He also mentioned how Skylar described the baby as extremely pale, not looking like a healthy newborn. He suggested that Skylar's eating disorder might have limited the baby's growth in the womb, possibly leading to a stillbirth or death shortly after birth. An expert on police questioning explained that some interrogation techniques can push people into false confessions, especially those who are more vulnerable to pressure. A clinical psychologist who talked to Skylar found she has a dependent personality disorder, which could make her more likely to give in to authority figures. The trial moved forward with both sides presenting their arguments and evidence. The defense attorney emphasized that Skylar is innocent until proven guilty, urging the jury to stand by her if they had any doubts about the baby's condition at birth. The prosecution argued that Skylar had ended a life to keep up appearances and should be held accountable. The trial was intense, and eventually the jury had to decide Skylar's fate.
With regard to count one, we, the jury in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of aggravated murder.
On September 12, 2019, after 4 hours, they ruled she wasn't guilty of the most serious charges, but did find her guilty of improperly handling the baby's remains, which could mean up to a year in jail. The Richardson family was relieved by the verdict but had to wait until sentencing. The next day, Skylar spoke publicly for the first time in court, expressing regret and apologizing for the pain caused by her actions. During a victim impact statement, Trey Johnson's mother spoke about her deep loss, saying no words could fully express her anguish over her granddaughter Annabelle's death. The judge believed different choices by Skylar could have saved her daughter, but sentenced her to 3 years of probation instead of a harsher penalty. The trial and its aftermath deeply affected Skylar and her family, causing her significant stress and health issues. 2 months after being mostly acquitted, Skylar shared her feelings in an interview with Cosmopolitan magazine. She talked about her regrets and the burden of guilt she carries every day for not opening up sooner about her situation. She described the period as devastating and admitted to struggling with depression since the incident. Skylar shared that she named her baby Annabelle because she didn't know anyone else with that name. She visits Annabelle's grave every week to leave pink flowers and finds a bit of peace knowing her baby is at rest. During an interview, Skylar opened up about how the trial almost broke her and even made her think about ending her life. She admitted that living with the truth was incredibly hard, especially when it felt like everyone else thought differently. She also felt like she lost a part of herself during the trial and was scared that people saw her as guilty because of all the news coverage. Trey, Annabelle's dad, told the media that he was shocked by the case because he didn't know about the pregnancy beforehand. It hit him hard when he found out months later in 2018, especially learning about it through social media when everything went public. Trey's family deeply felt the loss, and after the trial, they gathered to mark 2 years since Annabelle's passing. This whole situation really affected everyone involved. They all dealt with a lot of emotions no matter how the court ruled. Over time, Skylar got help for her eating disorders, went to college, and worked at the law firm that represented her. Her probation ended almost 2 years early in 2020. The judge decided there was no need to keep an eye on her since the crime wasn't severe. She had no prior offenses, and she was busy with work and school. In Skylar's first TV interview, her parents talked about how the case impacted them and their daughter. They mentioned a special angel marker at Annabelle's gravesite, expressing how heartbreaking it all was and how sometimes being near the grave brought them a little comfort. They also revealed that Skylar was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, suffering from frequent panic attacks and nightmares that often kept her from sleeping in her own room. In 2022, Skylar's lawyers tried to seal the court records of her conviction to help her move on, arguing that the public didn't need to see them anymore. But the prosecutors disagreed, saying it would lessen how serious her actions were. The judge ultimately decided to restrict access to the records, siding with Skylar's need for privacy, which stirred up new debates. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In the early hours of July 16, 2010, in the usually quiet town of Pico Truncado, a shocking event occurred. The body of Johanna Casas, a 20-year-old model and former beauty queen of the town, was found in a deserted area. She had been killed by 2 gunshot wounds. The prime suspects in the murder were Marcos Diaz, her partner until the day of the murder, and Victor Cingolani, her ex-boyfriend. But the story would soon take an even darker turn. Johanna Casas was born in Pico Truncado, a small town in the northern part of Santa Cruz province in Argentina. The town got its name from a nearby hill with a flat top. From there, you can see the oil wells, which are the main industry in the area. Though her exact birth date isn't officially recorded, family social media posts and news reports suggest she was born on July 19, 1990. Johanna wasn't the only baby to arrive that day. 15 minutes after she was born, her twin sister Edith was born. They are the oldest daughters of Marcelina del Carmen Orellana and Valentin Casas, who also had another child. Valentin, a police officer, eventually split from Marcelina, but he stayed very involved in his kids' lives. The twins looked incredibly alike. They had the same face, build, and even sounded similar. They even shared part of their names, as their parents named the younger twin Edith Johanna. They were so similar that their mom would sometimes mix them up, even changing the same baby's diaper twice. The sisters shared a special twin bond. Edith once said that they could feel when something was happening to the other. For instance, when Edith was 11, she had an accident while with her mom in another city nearby. She was in a coma for a few days, and when she woke up, she kept asking for Johanna. Valentin told her that Johanna, who was with him back in their hometown, felt like Edith was calling her. As they grew up, the twins became beautiful young women with very different personalities. Edith was quieter and more reserved, while Johanna was outgoing and liked fashion and makeup. This interest in fashion led Johanna to start a modeling career. She even participated in fashion shows and traveled to bigger cities like Bahia Blanca, where she was once crowned the beauty queen of Pico Truncado. In mid-2006, when Johanna was just 15, she met a local young man named Victor Cingolani, who was 21 at the time. They met one afternoon at the town bingo hall, where Johanna was with her dad and brother. Victor was at another table with his mom and a friend. Later, he mentioned noticing Johanna looking his way quite a bit. Victor had a reputation around town for being quite the charmer and a ladies' man. He worked long hours at the oil company and spent his free time out with friends, often choosing local brothels over bars. He boasted about being with over 40 women who came to him effortlessly. That day at the bingo, after they exchanged looks, Victor felt sure he could start something with her. He said that Johanna made the first move by coming over and giving him a note with her name and phone number on it. He texted her right away and they started talking. They went out a few times and soon made their relationship official. Marcelina, despite the age difference between Johanna and Victor, was okay with their relationship. She preferred this to her daughter randomly hanging out with others. They were together for about a year and a half. Over time, Johanna's parents noticed Victor's aggressive behavior toward her. There was an incident where Victor, trying to hit Johanna, accidentally broke a window and injured his hand instead. Things got even more complicated when Victor and Johanna broke up, and he started seeing Edith. Victor said his feelings for her grew over time, and he was never romantically involved with both sisters simultaneously. While he was with Johanna, Edith was dating another guy, and sometimes the four of them went out together. There were also times when Victor asked Johanna out, and Edith joined because she was home alone. Victor was drawn to Edith's quieter, more reserved nature. She was just as lovely as her sister, but simpler. Even after his relationship with Johanna ended, he kept in touch with Edith. Eventually, they admitted their feelings for each other, but Edith wanted to talk to Johanna about it first. Johanna told her sister they were adults and knew what they were doing, so she didn't oppose their relationship. However, the twins' close bond changed. When Edith started dating Victor, the friends they shared began to drift apart and each sister formed her own group. Victor and Edith eventually broke up, and Victor moved on to another local woman. Both sisters continued to have complicated relationships after Victor. When Victor ended another relationship 2 years later, he reached out to Johanna again. She was with someone else at the time, but quickly ended that relationship to get back with Victor. This reunion was brief, ending after 2 months because Johanna wanted children, which Victor did not. Afterward, Johanna started seeing a man named Marcos Diaz, who was disliked by her parents. The Diaz family was surrounded by rumors, including a serious allegation that one of Marcos's brothers had killed his own child. Marcos had a violent reputation and was possessive and controlling. He was overly jealous, constantly messaging Johanna and not allowing her to go out alone. Despite these red flags, they moved in together after just 6 months of dating. During this period, Victor rekindled his relationship with Edith, admitting he had never gotten over their breakup. This back and forth between the sisters would culminate in a series of dramatic, tragic, and scandalous events. On July 15, 2010, 4 days before their 19th birthday, Johanna went out partying with Marcos until about 3 in the morning. She was last seen alive as they left the party venue together. Early the next morning, a local dog walker discovered Johanna's lifeless body in an open field about 3 miles from the town center. The area, known as the forest belt of Pico Truncado, soon became the focus of intense police activity as news spread that one of the Casas twins had died. The autopsy later revealed that Johanna had been shot at close range in the heart and between the second and third ribs. Within hours of the discovery, police arrested Victor and Marcos as the main suspects in the crime, given their relationships with the victim. Investigators suspected that the murder was a planned act by both men, theorizing that Johanna wanted to end her relationship with Marcos, and the men decided that if she would not be with them, then she would not be with anyone. Marcos was released a week later due to a lack of evidence, despite having been the last person seen with Johanna the night before. Shortly after, authorities found DNA on a cigarette butt at the scene where Johanna was killed. Unfortunately, by that time, Marcos had fled, and it would be over 6 months before he was captured and subsequently placed in pre-trial detention. Meanwhile, Victor remained in custody, charged with the murder of his ex-girlfriend. However, he consistently maintained his innocence. According to his statements, on the morning of July 16th, he had been at the casino and then at a friend's house until 6 a.m. Surprisingly, his arrest and subsequent charges did not completely sever his relationship with Edith. Victor later recounted that on his first night in prison, he asked for a phone to call Edith and tell her he had nothing to do with her sister's death. He also wanted to express his longing to see her again. However, Edith hung up as soon as she recognized his voice, then changed her number, and he was unable to contact her again. Victor, trying to see Edith again, asked to be taken to the hospital, claiming he had a headache. On the way, he saw Edith walking hand in hand with another man, suggesting their intense relationship had ended. Edith later shared that she was going through a tough time. She was mourning her twin, the closest person to her, and dealing with her own inner turmoil. She felt ignored and over-medicated. 2 years after Johanna's death, in mid-2012, Victor stood trial for her murder, facing charges that painted him as abusive and controlling. The prosecution's case was built on 3 main pieces of evidence. The first was the paraffin test, done on Victor's hands right after his arrest, which detected gunpowder. The second was evidence from tracking dogs that placed him at the crime scene. Lastly, Victor's alibi failed as he couldn't confirm his whereabouts during the crime. Victor's lawyer pushed back, asking the higher court to throw out the evidence due to severe investigative errors, including a supposed audio recording of the judge of the case acknowledging mistakes by the inexperienced local police. Despite these challenges, the trial began on June 18, 2012. The prosecutor sought a 20-year sentence due to the alleged use of a firearm, while another suggested 15 years, and Victor's defense argued for his complete acquittal. Victor decided not to testify. The courtroom heard from various witnesses. Johanna's father accused Victor of past violent behaviors and threats towards his daughter, recounting a time he overheard Victor on a speakerphone call threatening Johanna. A woman who lived near the crime scene mentioned her son was the only one home that night and noted the delayed police response. The person who found Johanna testified that he saw no blood at the scene. Another witness spoke about Victor's complicated relationships with the twins, suggesting he saw Edith as a substitute for Johanna. Edith herself took the stand, having attended every day of the trial wearing a t-shirt demanding justice for her sister. She testified that Victor was physically abusive towards both her and Johanna and claimed that he had coerced them into intimate relations. Finally, she stated that she believed Victor had played a role in Johanna's death, calling him a psychopath. The hearings concluded, and on June 27, 2012, Victor was sentenced to 13 years in prison for simple homicide. However, the controversy surrounding the case was far from over. Despite his conviction for Johanna's murder and the serious allegations against him, Edith later shocked everyone by announcing that she was back in a relationship with Victor. It remained unclear how this reconciled relationship came about, but at some point, Edith became convinced of Victor's innocence and believed that the real perpetrator of the crime against her twin sister was Marcos, who was in pre-trial detention awaiting his trial. When asked about her sworn testimony, Edith claimed she had been pressured by her parents to make those accusations. Regarding the evidence presented by the prosecution, Edith sided with the defense. Just as Victor's lawyer had argued during the trial, there was never any conclusive evidence placing Victor at the crime scene. He also highlighted issues with the paraffin test, noting that it was conducted without expert witnesses present and the officer in charge didn't wear gloves and used his teeth to cut the tape. Furthermore, Victor was found to have the highest concentration of gunpowder on his right hand. He explained this by saying he had been in his brother-in-law's truck, who often went hunting and sometimes left bullets on the seats. Regarding the tracking dogs, the defense stated that 2 of them had yielded negative results, with only 1 dog indicating a positive result, and there were no witnesses to corroborate this. They also argued that a person's scent could linger at a scene for up to a month. Victor claimed the entire trial was rigged, suggesting that in Santa Cruz, anyone could be convicted just to satisfy the victim's family's demands. While in prison, Victor took up carpentry, stating that Johanna's death had transformed him, leading him to abandon his partying and drinking habits. Meanwhile, Edith had moved in with Claudia, Victor's sister, possibly due to estrangement from her own family when she decided to reconcile with the man convicted of her twins' murder. Together, they sold chairs, stools, tables, magazine racks, portraits, and paintings that Victor made in prison. With the proceeds, he bought a pair of rings. During a prison visit, Victor proposed to Edith, and she accepted. As expected, Edith's engagement to the man imprisoned for killing her sister was devastating news for the twins' parents, who could not comprehend what was happening. For them, Victor had murdered one daughter and was destroying the other. At that point, Marcelina declared that it was as if Edith had also died. Since moving in with her sister-in-law, Edith had barely seen her family. She believed they had brainwashed her daughter and that Claudia never left her alone for a second. When the engagement was announced, Edith's family filed a legal injunction to try to prevent the marriage, claiming that the 23-year-old was mentally unstable and fearing for her safety. The wedding was originally scheduled for December 5, 2012, when Victor had only served about 6 months of his sentence. However, the injunction delayed the ceremony. Despite this, Edith showed no signs of psychological or mental dysfunction that would prevent her from getting married. On February 14, 2013, Victor and Edith tied the knot amid widespread disapproval. Their story, a woman marrying the man accused of murdering her twin sister, grabbed headlines worldwide. An Argentine journalist known for his bold reporting style won the exclusive coverage with a bid of $1,500. Journalists from countries like Germany and the USA flocked to their small town, and big media outlets like the BBC and Daily Mail covered the story. Edith even got offers from Playboy magazine and was invited to join Argentina's top TV show, Dancing for a Dream, but she turned them all down. On their wedding day, just before noon, the couple headed to the civil registry office in Pico Truncado, heavily guarded due to the controversy. Chaos broke out when Victor, still incarcerated, arrived in a prison transport. The crowd became unruly, throwing punches, stones, eggs, and tomatoes, and shouting insults. The vehicle and the registry's doors were damaged, making the wedding front-page news. Despite the chaos, Edith and Victor declared their love and plans to start a family. Yet, the legal battle over Johanna Casas's murder was far from over. On June 4, 2013, the trial began for Marcos Diaz, who had been held at the Pico Truncado police station. Charged initially as an accessory, Marcos was described in court documents as violent and controlling, known for harassing his girlfriends and often involved in armed fights. His unexplained trip the day after Johanna's murder was seen as an escape attempt, and he stopped texting Johanna right after her supposed time of death, suggesting he knew she was gone. This contrasted sharply with his frequent texts to her the day before. DNA from a cigarette butt and a music CD linked to Marcos found near Johanna's body were key pieces of evidence against him. During the trial, Edith, supporting Victor, tearfully accused Marcos of killing her sister. Valentin, the twins' father, also testified, recalling the last time he saw Johanna with Marcos and describing Marcos as a dangerous man involved in cult-like activities, often seen causing trouble at the cemetery. Marcelina, for her part, described the accused as obsessive over her daughter. He never let her be alone, not even to attend family parties. However, the proceedings took an unexpected turn when prosecutor expanded the accusations. He posited that Marcos was the actual perpetrator of Johanna's murder and the only one present at the scene when her life was taken. As a result, on July 2, 2013, the court sentenced Marcos Diaz to 12 years in prison for the homicide of Johanna. At this point, 2 individuals were convicted for the same crime, each found guilty by different courts. Following the verdict, Marcos expressed dissatisfaction with the sentence, reasserted his innocence, and claimed he was convicted because there was no one else to investigate. On the other hand, Edith expressed relief and happiness that justice had finally been served. Meanwhile, the twins' mother chose not to speak to the media, while their father expressed his disagreement with the ruling. Victor's lawyer announced plans to seek his immediate release, asserting that they had always maintained his innocence. If the evidence indeed confirmed that Marcos was the only one at the crime scene, his client would be released immediately. Ultimately, on December 5, 2013, the Higher Court of Justice announced the release of Victor due to insufficient evidence to convict him. After his release, Victor sought compensation from the state, requesting $75,000 for his wrongful imprisonment. However, he received no payment. Over time, Marcelina began to reassess her view of the events and ultimately accepted that Victor had not been involved in Johanna's murder. Although the marriage between Edith and Victor lasted several years, by 2021 it was known that they had separated. She was living with a new partner and was expecting her first child, while he had rebuilt his life with another woman. After more than 2 decades of tangled romantic relationships, a brutal crime, and a couple of equally controversial trials, the case of Johanna Casas seemed to have finally reached a conclusion. Nevertheless, to this day, there are still those who debate the facts and continue to question whether Victor was truly innocent of the events of July 16, 2010, or if he managed to escape unpunished from one of Argentina's most sensational crimes. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
She sit straight up and got out of bed when she seen me and started screaming, and I tried to get her to be quiet. I had the knife, it was on the bed. It's about that long, and she rolled against it and cut right here, best I could tell, and I'm no medic. It cut this jugular vein right here.
How far across?
Right here. He described where he stabbed.
These were just some of the chilling confessions made by the truck driver who had been targeting women while crisscrossing America. Adam was born on August 6, 1964 in Jonesville, a small town in North Carolina, USA. He dropped out of high school early. Adam was a tall, burly man with a thick, rough beard. He was married to Miriam Benge for 5 years. Their relationship was rocky because, according to Miriam, Adam thought women were beneath him and that he could do whatever he wanted with them. He was abusive to Miriam and even to his own mother, whom he insulted and hit. In 1993, the couple divorced. That year, Adam became a truck driver and began traveling along the East Coast. He drove trucks and worked part-time at a chicken processing plant near his home in Jonesville. Years later, he settled down with another woman. They lived in a trailer home with 3 daughters. Adam had never been in serious trouble, but those who knew him described him as dismissive of women and often antisocial, controlling, and always ready to pick a fight. A former co-worker traveled with Adam in his truck for about a month in the late 90s, covering much of the country. His co-worker eventually refused to work with him any longer because of Adam's constant negativity, argumentative nature, and disrespectful attitude towards women. In his truck, Adam carried a DVD of a horror movie called Hunting Humans. The film, about a serial killer who stalked and then knifed his victims, had a huge impact on him. So much so that when he set out on his trucking trips to the northeastern United States in the summer of 2007, the first things he packed were the DVD, 2 large hunting knives, a torch, and a leather mask with holes for the eyes and mouth. In July 2007, Adam left North Carolina and headed east on Interstate 78, with stops planned in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Early on July 13, 2007, Darlene Ewald, a 42-year-old mother of 2, was on the phone in the backyard of her home in the middle-class suburb of West Hanover Township, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. While she spoke, her husband Todd, a carpenter and youth soccer coach, and their children, Nick and Nicole, ages 24 and 21, were asleep inside. It was around 2 a.m., and Darlene was chatting with a family friend about a surprise trip they were planning. That friend had planned a Caribbean cruise but ended up offering their tickets to Todd and Darlene after having to discipline their sons. Darlene was thrilled about the upcoming October adventure. Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching her on the warm night. Suddenly, from the darkness, a figure emerged wielding a long knife. It was Adam. The killer slit the woman's throat and violently stabbed her in the left side of her chest until she died within minutes. All she could scream was, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" On the other end of the phone, her friend heard the sudden change in her voice. Although Darlene no longer responded, the call was still active. He shouted her name, hoping she would answer. Panicked, he rushed upstairs to wake his wife and told her something terrible had happened to Darlene and that he needed to go to her house immediately. Meanwhile, after the murder, Adam calmly returned to his truck, parked at a nearby stop, and drove away, leaving behind the crime scene. Chad and Patty, Darlene's friends, sped to her house. Arriving there, the place was eerily quiet and they headed to the backyard. The kitchen lights shone through the sliding glass doors, and they could see Darlene's lifeless body slumped in a chair, her eyes still open and a gaping wound in her throat. Shocked, they immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, Todd was still asleep in his room. An officer yelled at him to show his hands. Todd, groggy and barely understanding what was happening, was blinded by flashlights and confronted with guns pointed at him. Nick experienced a similar rude awakening. Both men were handcuffed and taken to the kitchen. Todd kept asking what was happening and where his wife was, but the police did not answer. Then he noticed Darlene's purse on the table next to her car keys and cell phone, which made him worry. The detective eventually removed Todd's handcuffs and took him to another room, while another officer spoke with Nick in the kitchen. Todd then received the devastating news. Darlene was dead. He was heartbroken, feeling a pain like never before, as if someone had ripped his heart out. The whole Ewald family was in shock. Meanwhile, Adam continued with his life as if nothing had happened. Later that morning, he picked up a load from a company as scheduled to continue with his work. Hours later, the detectives interrogated Todd at the station. He struggled to explain how he hadn't heard anything. However, the detectives were not satisfied with his testimony and considered him the prime suspect in his wife's death. The next day, they brought him back to the station for further questioning. They asked about sensitive points in their marriage and accused him of killing her over financial troubles based on their reviewed finances. Todd insisted he had a good job and savings and had no reason to murder his wife. The police then suggested that she wanted to separate from him, which led to her death. Todd maintained his innocence and even took a lie detector test, which the police said he failed. Confused and desperate, he then sought a lawyer. The family was left completely devastated by the crime. Since the incident, Nicole, the 21-year-old daughter, refused to go out alone at night. Her brother Nick relived the tragic memory of their mother's death, often lying awake at night. Todd said the murder destroyed his life and wished he could have been there to save her. Darlene was the first, but sadly not the last victim of the so-called highway killer. On the night of July 17, 2007, in Conewago Township, rural York County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Patricia Brooks was sleeping on her couch when Adam burst into her home. The house was close to Interstate 76 and about 25 miles south of where he committed his first murder. Adam stabbed Patricia in the neck and shoulder with a huge knife. She woke up to indescribable pain, immediately covering the wound with her hands and screaming. Adam then fled through the back door he had entered minutes before, allowing Patricia to survive the attack, although she could not make out any features of the man dressed in black who had attacked her. Monica loved her new home, located in Bloomsbury, New Jersey. Everyone there was friendly, and she felt that nothing bad could happen. She felt so secure that she never locked her doors. Monica had great friends with whom she spent hours talking online. She also had other big passions: photography, motorcycles, and rock and roll. Without any ties, she lived life to the fullest, attending concerts and traveling, embracing each day as if it were her last. On the night of July 28, 2007, Monica was sleeping in her bed when, around midnight, Adam parked his truck at a nearby stop. Dressed in black and carrying a knife, he hid in the shadows, silently moving through the picturesque streets in the dead of night, searching for unlocked doors. Finding Monica's front door open, he quietly stepped inside. He moved through the house noiselessly until he reached the bedroom on the first floor. Startled awake, Monica turned on the light, and that's when he attacked her with the knife. He fatally stabbed her in the throat. She bled out and died quickly, but not before struggling against her assailant. Adam stabbed her multiple times in the neck and chest. Monica died alone at the hands of that monster, without time to call for help or escape. She was cornered with nowhere to go. The crime shocked the peaceful community. Initially, detectives focused on people Monica might have been romantically involved with, as it seemed like a crime of passion. However, they found no solid leads. The police had no suspects until they noticed something significant. Monica lived near the truck stop and the interstate. They decided to contact the FBI, which had begun to systematize investigations of similar crimes occurring along interstate highways across the country. The federal agency suspected there might be one or several serial killers, possibly a trucker who used the highways to randomly select his victims, stalk them, kill them, and then escape. Less than 24 hours after Monica's murder, a new chapter of horror unfolded in Chelmsford, a town in Massachusetts. Adam continued his route northward, parking his truck at a rest area. Around 11 p.m. on July 29, 2007, in an apartment complex, a woman spotted a man hiding in the bushes and called the police. By the time the officers arrived, the man had vanished, but a few hours later, security agents received a frantic call through the 911 emergency service. A man was trying to enter the home of a woman located in a mobile home park. She reported that her daughter thought she saw someone staring at their house, so she went outside to check. There, she encountered an individual dressed all in black, wearing a mask, looking like a ninja. The man turned around, followed her, and banged on the door. She was terrified. The police arrived within minutes, but once again, the suspect had vanished. 90 minutes later, around 4:30 a.m., Adam showed up at the home of Kevin and Jeannie McDonough, located about 2 miles from the trailer park and just off the highway. Kevin, a 49-year-old utility line contractor, and his wife, a 47-year-old administrative clerk, lived in a 4-bedroom house in Chelmsford, a town named one of the best places to live in the United States in 2007. Their 2 children, Shay, 15, and Ryan, 19, also lived in the house. Adam tried the back door and found it unlocked. Shay had left it unlocked around midnight because she thought her brother was still out, not knowing that Ryan had stayed at a friend's house that night. So, Adam entered the house without any trouble. The family's dog, a black Labrador mix named Bosco, was outside and never barked, later leading to suspicions that he might have been drugged by the intruder. That warm night, everyone in the town was asleep. Shay had moved to the guest room because it had air conditioning and was right next to her parents' room, making it cooler to sleep. Suddenly, she felt a huge hand covering her mouth and nose. It was Adam, wearing a mask with openings for the eyes and mouth. In his other hand, he held a huge hunting knife. She couldn't breathe and couldn't see well in the dark room. At first, she thought it was her brother who had come home late, but then she heard a stranger's voice threatening to kill her and making some noise. Adam pulled down the sheets that covered her, and that's when she panicked. She, a swimmer with strong legs, began kicking vigorously against the wall adjoining her parents' room. What happened next, in moments of desperation in the quiet Massachusetts neighborhood, was both a complete nightmare and an incredible story of heroism. She's frantic kicks and a muffled groan woke her parents, who thought she was having a nightmare. But when they entered the room, they saw the huge intruder, initially just a large black silhouette to them. Adam, who was 5.9 feet tall and weighed 245 pounds, was confronted by Kevin, who weighed 160 kilograms and was 5.6 feet tall. Kevin lunged at the intruder, grabbing his wrists, throwing him to the ground and pinning him down. He shouted, demanding to know who he was, while Jeannie tried to wrestle the knife away. Suddenly, Adam burst with adrenaline and stood up with Kevin on his back. Kevin held on and wrapped his arm around Adam's neck. Then, both men crashed against a wall. With his back against the wall, Kevin squeezed the criminal's trachea as hard as he could. Meanwhile, Jeannie managed to take the knife away but severely cut both her hands in the process. By then, Shay had run out and was calling 911 on her cell phone. She told the operator that a tall, burly man had entered her room and threatened her life, and that her parents had caught him. Jeannie and Kevin fought hard to defend themselves, struggling for their lives while waiting for the police. Sometimes, people freeze in situations like these, but the McDonoughs undoubtedly summoned incredible strength and managed to subdue Adam, who was much larger than them, even wresting the knife from him. The officers arrived at the house in 4 minutes and saw Adam subdued by the family. Kevin had applied a powerful headlock that immobilized him. One of the officers warned the intruder not to move or he'd shoot him in the head, while Kevin calmly brushed himself off and asked the police to remove that scum from his home. As the police patted him down, they found evidence that alarmed them. A couple of knives, larger military-style household knives, and a belt from which sheaths for the blades hung. They also discovered a flashlight used for strangling, a ninja star, a hood, and a terrifying leather mask with cut-out eyes and mouth. Meanwhile, in Adam's truck, they found what appeared to be trophies or souvenirs from previous victims and several DVDs, including one from the movie Hunting Humans. After the incident, life slowly returned to normal for the family. Shay started seeing a therapist to help manage the terror she sometimes felt, but she still had problems sleeping alone. In fact, their dog Bosco began to sleep by her side every night. Whenever she saw a shadow, Shay would still get up, but she was grateful to be alive and often remembered how her parents fought for her. They didn't consider themselves superheroes, just parents who acted instinctively to protect their daughter. The FBI was handling a database of about 80,000 unresolved violent crimes across the United States. They had started gathering information on serial killings and assaults near major highways. By 2007, they had recorded more than 500 murders with similar characteristics over the past 30 years, but they were concerned there might be more hidden cases. Approximately 200 suspects had been identified, most of them truckers. With their investigations, the FBI had helped state police with baffling crimes that remained unsolved, and also connected cases that were sometimes half a country apart. Often, suspects use distance as a smokescreen to cover their tracks. When they dispose of a body and move 2 or 3 states away, they know it will be difficult to be identified. The first thing the FBI does when it receives a case is to look for specific characteristics they can investigate. For example, if someone is strangled, the search focuses on all strangling cases. After receiving calls from the police in Massachusetts and New Jersey about unresolved stabbing cases, an FBI analyst determined they were very similar and not far from major highways. This prompted them to put officers from both states in contact. Soon they began linking Adam to his other crimes. Investigators learned that the criminal had been in Bloomsbury the night Monica Massaro died, at a truck stop less than a mile from her house. A receipt found in his truck led them to that lead. In August 2007, a New Jersey police investigator decided to go to Massachusetts to question Adam about Monica's murder. For over an hour, the detective conversed amiably with Adam, just trying to gain his trust. Then, he directly asked if Adam had attacked anyone in New Jersey. Adam then asked if there was the death penalty in that state. The detective replied that no one had been executed there for years. Adam smirked and said, "That's why I haven't done anything there. What I've done is what I've done, and I haven't done anything wrong." Then Adam confessed to killing Monica and described the crime in detail.
She sat straight up and got out of bed when she seen me and started screaming, and I tried to get her to be quiet. I had the knife, it was on the bed. It's about that long, and she rolled against it and cut right here, best I could tell, and I'm no medic. It cut this jugular vein right here.
How far across?
Showing no remorse and exhibiting great cruelty. Initially, Adam claimed he was just a struggling trucker trying to make ends meet for his family of 5. He said he had been sidelined by a back injury, which affected his finances and required him to take medication for various ailments, including hallucinations and diabetes. He claimed his original plan was only to steal some money. He tried to justify his actions by saying he had lost everything, including his family. At the same time, he insisted that he respected the law and treated people the way he liked to be treated. He claimed that when he entered Monica's house and found her asleep, he covered her mouth, but she resisted, and in the struggle, she accidentally rolled onto the knife and bled to death. He then claimed he tried to cover up the crime by stabbing her multiple times to make it look like a sexual crime. The detectives found his version of accidental death hard to believe. Adam insisted that he didn't intend to kill her and that he used his knives as intimidation tactics in case he was discovered. He also denied deriving any sexual pleasure from the murders. Almost a month after his arrest in Massachusetts, Adam was charged with Monica's murder. In most of the cases, DNA has become one of the most accurate tools for individual identification, used by thousands of labs. It's employed first for the identification of biological traces of interest in criminal investigations of various crimes, second in the identification of human remains and missing persons, and third for biological research on paternity and other kinship relations. In Adam's case, DNA was also essential in linking him to his crimes. Weeks after the interrogation where he confessed to killing Monica, investigators received the analysis of the knives recovered in Massachusetts. One of them had blood on it. DNA analysis proved it was Monica's, as well as a necklace found among Adam's possessions in his truck. The man had also discarded some gloves as he ran from Patricia's house. Further analysis revealed the gloves had DNA from both Adam and Monica. Forensic scientists found blood samples on it that turned out to be from Darlene and Patricia, the first two women he attacked. Legal proceedings against the highway killer then began. In December 2007, Adam was sentenced to 25 to 30 years after pleading guilty to the attempted murder of Shay. He pleaded guilty to 9 of the 10 charges he faced, which included breaking and entering, armed assault in a dwelling, assault with intent to murder, and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. He only denied the charge of attempting to rape a minor. When the judge asked him if he had done all that the McDonough family accused him of, the burly, bearded man, his arms chained to his waist, simply said, "Almost everything." Shay, who was 16 at the time, did not appear in court on the day of the sentencing, but her parents did. Jeannie, her mother, told Adam that one day he would have to answer for his actions, not just in a court of law. Adam's next trial was in October 2008 in New Jersey, where he pleaded guilty to Monica's murder and was sentenced to 50 years. Finally, in June 2010 in Pennsylvania, Adam pleaded guilty to 2 other crimes to avoid the death penalty. He was then sentenced to between 10 and 20 years for the attempted murder of Patricia and received a life sentence for the murder of Darlene. Members of Darlene's family addressed the judge before the sentencing, expressing a mix of sadness and anger. Todd, Darlene's husband, said what happened was the result of a senseless and unnecessary act by a coward. Adam, wearing the orange and white prison uniform, had his hands shackled. He looked different from the man who had been arrested. He had lost a considerable amount of weight and had his hair and beard cut short. He showed no emotion when he received his sentence and declined his right to speak because he had nothing to say, as he pointed out during the trial. Meanwhile, Nick, Darlene's 25-year-old son at the time of the trial, asked the judge to review the investigation and sentence his mother's killer to death. He told reporters outside the courthouse that he wished to see him dead, but the prosecution had decided not to seek the death penalty as such executions are rare in Pennsylvania. Adam Leroy is serving his sentences at a maximum security prison with 2,000 beds. Authorities have speculated whether Adam was involved in other murders, given the extensive routes truckers take, but this has not been proven. Even the criminal himself has refused to comment to the police on this speculation. One such case occurred in the town where Adam lived and relates to the murder of a police officer who was shot 7 times in October 1996, and his body was found in his patrol car after he had pulled over a truck reported as stolen. Although the modus operandi in this case is substantially different from Adam's, a composite sketch of the suspect created with the help of witnesses resembles the highway killer. In 2011, Jeannie McDonough published a book recounting how a normal family ended the criminal crusade of a serial killer. It started as a personal diary with which the woman tried to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions she felt after saving her daughter from the monster Adam, and the guilt and sadness she experienced for the other victims of the man. She then began to learn more about the women who fell victim to the criminal. She attended several trials in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and started exchanging letters with relatives and friends of the victims. All of this is detailed in the book. Over time, Shay moved in with some friends and began working as a nanny, and her parents had to fight against the sense of overprotection towards their daughter. They also installed a powerful home security system. The case of Adam brings us back to motiveless killers. He was perhaps an aggressive man, but with no criminal record, who suddenly at the age of 43 embarked on a 17-day murder spree, committing crimes against 4 women who had no connection to each other or to him. They simply lived in houses near a major road and had the misfortune of leaving their doors unlocked. The highways became the hunting ground for this man, who chose his victims randomly, only focusing on those who could not defend themselves or pose a threat to him. This concludes today's Unreal True Crime episode. Again, I remind you to subscribe and leave a like to let me know you appreciate my work. Good night, until next time.